he has a history in examining the statistical details of the last election, and he's, I think, made with Election Truth Alliance, he's made some news. Now, you can buy into this, you can reject it, but I think what you have to realize with Election Truth Alliance is that it's provocative and interesting and worth exploring. So I'm not saying it has to be acted upon, and I'm anxious to see some of his latest details related to the last election. There are statistical anomalies related to this past election, and he is someone who can get into it in a detailed way with us, and he will do that in a minute. I also want to mention, though, because it's just quite interesting, that he, as a cybersecurity specialist, may have some views on this story that we just touched on, with all of these various national security officials having self-breached, their general dome of security, and included this Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic in war plans for Yemen. He was a former 25B in the Army Reserves. How about it for Nathan Taylor, everyone?
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Co-founder of Election Truth Alliance. Again, when we found you, you were just, I felt like it was just the germination of some notions you had, some inconsistencies you identified. And now it's become a much more sort of robust effort on your part. And before I get into that, I want to ask you for your thoughts on what we were just talking about, which is this breach of national security, the carelessness and recklessness with which this administration seems to have included a journalist in their war plans for Yemen.
Yeah, that was very frustrating to see. I heard about it immediately. And as you said, both with my background in cybersecurity, there's also a 25 Bravo, which is, in this case, computer tech specialist in the Army Reserves, but I also cross-trained as a 25 uniform, which is a signal communications specialist. And you have a security clearance in those cases, and it's very clear the training you go through, what you can and cannot do. And to use a signal app, the military, the Army specifically, has regulations on what type of communication systems you can use, because the Department of Defense, the Army, has to own those systems. They don't know, like, if you don't own the systems, you could theoretically gain access to that information. Whoever stores the data could have access. So Signal is not although it is encrypted, although I have used it personally, it's in the encryption, it is not owned by the Department of Defense. It's not a military asset. So you're not allowed to use it to send military sensitive information. So all of this, as you said, people kind of two-stepping around the problem. It doesn't address the problem. This is not a secure means of communication for the military. And then on top of that, this is probably the most secret information you can really gain access to is military real-time war plans. And people mentioned that you're only supposed to receive that information in a secure environment with no digital assets, no phones, nothing, so that you can't record that and then go and take it somewhere else. So to send that across a cell phone app where it's documented and third parties can gain access, which is the problem, is anyone else who's in that group chat, they are retaining that data, and someone else could come along and open up their phone app, and now you have wartime plans. This is a big deal. This is absolutely. I would have went to prison for this.
Sure,
I would have went to prison for less than this. So
that's the point, and I think it's been made, and will probably continue to be made for the next couple of days. That if anybody else were involved in this, look, this is what they made news with around Hillary Clinton and the private server. I mean, for a long time, they were dining out on Hillary Clinton. And when I say they, I'm talking about the GOP and those running for president at the time. It was Rubio. It was all of them. And Pete Hegseth, I mean, just was relentless on Fox News Channel saying this, makes American lives vulnerable. This is a breach. It's reckless. It's all the, and you should go to prison for this kind of thing. And if she were anyone else, she would go to prison. Well, here we are. And this week, it looks as though there was something, if not, and again, the Hillary Clinton stuff, as I understood, there was no top secret information actually communicated in those communications that they identified. that was at all sensitive. But again, leaving the Hillary Clinton thing out, and I'm not some Hillary backer, but I mean, this, as you say, seems to take it to another level. And so it's
The
deeply disturbing.
concern,
Yeah.
the concern here is this is what we know about. So if this was a standard operating process for them, what else are they doing communication-wise? Are they using Signal for other things they shouldn't be using it for? These are all things
Right.
that really need to be answered, because you would have never known about it unless a investigative journalist spoke up and was on a group chat. My concern with Signal like cybersecurity as well is there are recent concerns with Signal being potentially compromised by Russia. Not that Signal itself is compromised, but Russia has been taking steps to try and infiltrate Signal communications. Go look up some stuff about QR codes, potentially hosting malicious access and breaking your chain of encryption. So these are real concerns that we're seeing every day. It's a new thing every day. So that's the thing, is you want to be secure, you want to be safe. Our military has standards and laws and rules for how they handle this, and those weren't followed in this case. So that's why it's a big deal. Who knows who could have had this information? Who knows what other information you could gain access to? That's why you don't use Signal to do this.
I like that you allude to the fact that, is this the way that they communicate in other instances? Because that was the first thought I had. I mean, you can't tell me that this is their first rodeo on Signal. I think they use Signal all the time. I mean, look how quickly they slapped together this conversation and included this investigative journalist by accident. I mean, to me, that shows that it's a reflex move, kind of, that they go to Signal to communicate. All right, now
it's a huge concern. Yeah.
Pardon my voice, but now let's get into some of your statistics related to the last election. This is the election that saw Donald Trump sweep the swing states, and statistically, there were you felt some anomalies.
Yeah, so we have prepared a additional presentation. The Election Truth Alliance, which I'm a co-founder of. There are two other co-founders. One is Lily and one is Jive. Jive is our hardcore certified statistician. Lily is political science and has been amazing about keeping the organization functioning. And then I'm, the cybersecurity guy with a little bit of data analysis, a little bit of stats, nothing crazy. But we are the co-founders of the organization, but we are not the organization in its entirety. We now have exceeded over 30 volunteers working with us. Many of them have PhDs in their respective fields. Many of them have master's degrees. Some of them are public. So we have public individuals like David and Nate, who you can go and look at some of our recent work, and their names are on it, and they are public. They have masters and bachelors and PhDs in their respective fields. So it's not just me. And we do internally verify this information before we publish it. So Pennsylvania, for example, we will be following up with a final report summarizing all of our findings and concerns here. We've released 2 of the 3 reports. And in this case, this is one of the swing states. So we've looked at Nevada, I think on our last show.
That's right.
When you let me come on and talk about it, we talked about Nevada.
You had some good stuff on Nevada. And our time is short, so I'll encourage you to giddy up a little bit here. Thank you.
So we followed up with Pennsylvania. We looked at 3 counties in Pennsylvania, and knowing what we know of Nevada, we applied it here. And so I believe I can actually manipulate the slideshow. Awesome.
All right.
So Pennsylvania, we looked at three counties: Philadelphia, Allegheny. However you pronounce it. I can't pronounce it correctly, and everyone makes fun of me.
I say Allegheny, like game.
Allegheny.
Like
there
game.
you go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So these are some of the most populated counties in the state. And we looked at these because they have published their data as well, but they vote by precinct. All of Pennsylvania votes by precinct. They have really only 2 types of voting. That's mail-in and election day. And then they have provisional voting, which is generally less than 1% of the votes. So it doesn't really show anything. Why we want to highlight Pennsylvania? There's a few things that you may be familiar with. One of them is the amount of bomb threats on election day. Over at least 32 counties had bomb threats in Pennsylvania on election night. And so we actually had a video talking about the bomb threats, talking about some of the other notable statements about USB drive issues with the voting machines and the tabulation machines. And then there's 2 other things that have recently come up. One of them was during the pre-inauguration rally before the inauguration for President Trump. He specifically mentioned Pennsylvania, and he referenced the vote counting computers in Pennsylvania and how Elon Musk knows them and that they won Pennsylvania in like a landslide.
I
So
don't
that was
remember
a
that.
very
He
interesting
he
quote.
mentioned that Elon Musk knows the. I don't recall that. That's
Yes.
extraordinary. Yeah.
Yeah, we have that clip. I was going to include it, but it's too big for the PowerPoint.
Okay.
So it is very public. If you search Pennsylvania vote counting computers on YouTube, you're going to find clips of it.
Cool.
It
Okay.
was very concerning, and the night that happened, my inbox was full. So people are concerned about that. And then finally, the last thing was there was a pre-election lottery targeted to Pennsylvania and other swing states. Elon Musk's Super PAC, America PAC, or whatever, actually was doing this lottery where they were promising $1 million if you registered, and then $100 to sign a petition, and then you get money as well for referrals. The reason why we highlight this, it was questionably legal in the sense you're not really allowed to give people money to vote, but I think they fought that court battle.
It was a contest, they said. Exactly. So,
right.
Yeah.
The concern for me and the concern for my organization as we go forward is if you were to gather voter information, what could you do with it? And so the concern is if you had everything you needed to vote for someone and you had the ability to manipulate the machines, could you vote for people that didn't vote?
Yeah, that's fascinating, and that's a
concern.
And the reason it's additionally fascinating, just a quick note, is that it's happening in Wisconsin again right now. Musk is getting Wisconsin voter information because there's a huge election right now for the Supreme Court of Wisconsin. So please continue. Go ahead.
That's on our radar as well, and we have the same concerns there. So we decided let's look at these 3 counties. They did conduct an audit after the election. They audited 2% across the county, and then they did a RLA. The problem is the RLA, these audits we feel like weren't sufficient sampling wise, and we've been digging into these deeper. If you undersample some of the highest density locations and you were potentially manipulating, would you find manipulation? If you only count a few, you may not. So we are diving deeper into how they conducted these and the Wisconsin audits as well. So now we'll get into the statistical concerns. Philadelphia is the largest, most heavily populated county, and you're going to see that specifically highlighted here. So here is that drop-off vote analysis. I always have to explain this a little bit more than I need to, or people are a little more confused about this. So the way you read these is there's 2 colors. One is the Democratic president, and the other is the Republican president. The blue is the Democrats, red is the Republicans. And all you're looking at if a candidate is performing underneath or above the 0% line, which is the amount of votes the senator got in this case. And so it's not that you're underneath or above, it's how consistently you are underneath or above. And so this is Pennsylvania, 424, all vote types. And so we see that not only is the Republican Party overperforming pretty consistently, it's mirrored as well by the Democrats underperforming. This is a concern because if you compare this to other elections in the past or other states that aren't swing states, you should see more variety in how you perform. It should be far more chaotic in this case. And so instead, we see more of a consistency, which we are concerned may not be reflective of human voting patterns. And so we have published some of these other drop-offs analysis, and Smart Election has as well. So please go check out Smart Elections on their website. They have all 50 states, I believe, and all the swing states and represented like this. So we're going to actually break this down real quick. This is by vote type. So on the left is mail-in, and on the right is election day. You will very quickly notice mail-in, we see a lot of that underperformance for the Democratic president disappear, right? It goes away. We still see Trump overperforming, and that could be normal. Maybe the senator isn't as popular. But the point being is a majority of this underperformance is occurring election day on the right. And we flagged this because if this was a non-human voting pattern and it was caused by manipulation, why is it only occurring in election day? Are you only manipulating election day? Does that mean mail-in is then more normal? And so we actually apply this when we look at our statistics. This is the same concern we saw in Clark County, Nevada. We saw mail-in and election day actually there didn't show significant signs of manipulation, but early voting did. Pennsylvania doesn't have an early voting. They vote pretty much election day or mail-in. And so here is one of those statistical graphs. This is a scatter plot, and I'll explain this for the people listening in later on. This is mail-in for Philadelphia, the largest county in the state. And so the bottom axis, the x-axis, is the percentage of votes of turnout. It's how many people showed up to vote. In this case, for mail-in, less than 50% of the votes were mail-in and the other half were election day. That's why the x-axis is 0 to 40% in this case, and you only see votes for that. Each of these little circles is a precinct because they vote by precinct in Pennsylvania. And then the y-axis is the percentage of votes each candidate got. So if you, for example, look at the far right, you'll see around 40% for the Republican Party. Trump got less than 20% of the mail-in votes. And then Harris, for example, got closer to 80 to 90%. That's how you read these graphs. But what's important here is the shape. In this case, we're not arguing an expected distribution or anything like this because we don't have data down to the machine level. It's precinct. It's averaged out. But what we see is for mail-in, as more people voted across these precincts, we see that both parties generally had more of a blob and a straight line. They don't spike upwards. They stay more consistent. So the Republicans, for example, stay pretty consistent around below the 20%, and they stay below 20% as you go further to the right. Same for the Democrats. They stay between 80 and 100% as you grow further to the right. So we say this doesn't really show any huge concerns here, right? This looks more normal to us from what we've seen, and it matches what other counties are showing. These other two counties will show as well. Here's what we're highlighting as concerning. This is election day for Philadelphia. This is the same graph, same scatter plot. The difference here is this is the remaining half of the votes. So up to 60 to 70% in some of the precincts were election day. And same way you read this is as more people turned out to vote, we see that the Republican Party began to gain in the amount of the percentage of votes they got across these precincts. And you see that as a spike growing up and to the right. And on the counterpoint is the Democrats. As more people showed up to vote for election day and voted across these precincts, they begin to decrease in the amount of votes they get. This is very strange to us because we don't see it in mail-in and we don't see it in provisional voting, which we didn't reflect because it's only a few lines, but it's the same thing. You don't see a change as more votes were cast across these precincts. More people showed up to vote. So on the right is both parties separated, and you see the Republicans grow up and to the right as a spike, and then the Democrats shrink down and to the right as well. What would cause this, right?
Yeah, what would cause that exactly? And couldn't it be caused by the fact that there just wasn't as much Democratic turnout on election day?
Right. That's an excellent point. So the question we have is, does turnout really correlate to party? And could this be caused by other things that aren't manipulation? The concern is if this was manipulation, this would match what you would expect to see. If you were changing votes as the amount of votes cast grows, this is what you would expect to see for the party benefiting. This would mirror what we're seeing in Clark County, Nevada. Now, to address perhaps, and this is an excellent argument. I love when people come back to us and say, hey, here's a concern I have about this. The argument was, let's say for turnout, higher turnout in smaller precincts would cause this, right? That's what the question was. If we only have 100 people registered to vote in a precinct and 80 people show up to vote and they vote Republican, would that cause this to occur, right? Would the smaller, more rural areas do this? And so we have provided you another visualization. This has never been seen yet. We've not published this yet. We're going to continue to validate and verify this, and then we will actually put this out on in our reports, and we'll also try and build a dashboard so you guys can go and play with the data yourselves online. But this visualizes the size of the precincts. So it's the same way you read it. The x-axis here is the turnout, how many people showed up to vote. Each of these lines is binning for precincts. So they're not individual precincts. They're all of the precincts where, for example, blue here is Harris. So if you look at like the 20%, at the very top is over 10,000 votes cumulative. And each of those little lines, a part of this is a precinct. So this is a little chaotic way to show it, but this shows you the size. So the larger precincts are at the base of each of these lines. And so what we see is for mail-in, we don't see any consistent pattern of turnout reflecting more precincts or less for both parties. We just see that In this case, the Republican Party got less precincts. The size doesn't change. The size is very random between both parties. What we notice for the right here, this is election day, we notice that as the amount of turnout increases and you get further to the right on this graph, the size of the precincts does not actually, the smaller precincts are not what Trump is winning in these cases. You'll notice as turnout increases, he's winning the larger precincts as they average out as well. So the argument was, if you were more popular in the rural areas and the smaller precincts had a higher turnout percentage, right? 100 people showed up to vote, only 100 people were registered, and then they were Republican, you would see the turnout spike. In this case, we don't see a correlation between the size of the precincts being smaller for Trump. We see the opposite. We actually see him winning in places where more votes were cast, independent of precinct size. So that it doesn't reflect normal human voting behavior. Instead, what you see here is if they were changing votes after a certain amount of people were voting across these precincts, in the places where more people voted overall, we're starting to see the Republican Party gain votes and grow. And that's what's shown at the very end of this graph here on the right. And here's a note, Harris did win Philadelphia. But even though she won, we're still seeing indications of manipulation benefiting the Republican Party as turnout increases. Any questions here?
Just review the last part again. You're saying that Harris won Philadelphia, but
Yes.
you're saying where on the graph am I seeing though that Trump rallied in Philadelphia nonetheless?
Yes, on this right graph, which is election day,
Okay.
we see that after, in this case, well, after around 56% x-axis, we begin to see the amount of turnout as it is increasing. The Republicans are gaining vote and then begin to exceed the amount of Democratic votes, independent of precinct size.
Yeah,
independent of precinct size. So it's not the smaller precincts. It's the places where more people were voting.
Got it. Okay.
So this is a concern. And then we'll speed through the rest because it's just further showing these same concerns. This is a turnout analysis similar to what we just saw, but this is a little more focused across multiple races. So this is mail-in ballots in Erie County. You've not seen this yet. This is the same type of scatter we saw before, but on the left, it's precinct by vote amount. So it just votes on the x-axis. So for example, some of these precincts had over 800 votes cast. Some of them only had, a couple hundred. And then the y-axis is the percentage for both candidates. So we see for mail-in, for Erie, Harris is exceeding by somewhat on average around 60 to 70% of the votes, and Trump is underperforming. And the right is a similar concept, is the same data, but we've just turned it into the turnout percentage, as we saw before. So what we're expecting to see is if there was no manipulation, then we should see both of these be a straight line, right? As we're seeing in mail-in, if turnout increases, the party, the candidate should stay somewhat consistent. And so as we kind of blow through the last of these graphs, you're going to see that for election day, for every county we looked at, we see that change. We see as the turnout increases, the Republican Party grows in the amount of votes they get, independent of anything else, only in election day. So we see it in Erie County. We see it the same for Allegheny, did I say it right?
Allegheny, yeah.
Allegheny. Mail-in looks the same. It's a normal horizontal line, vertical, flat, straight line. And then election day, we see that change. We see the Republican Party gaining votes as the turnout increases.
And again, Nathan, that could not be accounted for by the fact that they were more motivated Republican voters to show up on election day?
No, in this case, as we saw before, even if your precinct, 70% of the people turned out to vote in the precinct and all voted Republican, you would just see one of these dots, one of these precincts become more Republican or less. We're seeing all the precincts shift the same way as turnout increases. This, in our opinion, could only be caused, unless we find further evidence or further support or we test more theories, we are concerned this is caused by a manipulation of the tabulation machines where they're all shifting as turnout increases. And it doesn't match because the demographics of some of these places are more liberal. So where are these Republican votes coming from? Why are they gaining, and why are they only growing in election day and not mail-in? And then here's the real concern as we kind of wrap up here. This is the down ballot races in Pennsylvania. This is the Senate seats for Allegheny election day. Well, and we're seeing the same signs of manipulation in the down ballot races, where it's a Democrat and a Republican facing off against each other. We're not seeing this manipulation in the nonpartisan or uncontested races, where there's only like one actual candidate per party and the rest are write-ins, or it's just a nonpartisan race. So here's the concern. Why are we only seeing this trend occur for places where there's a Democrat and a Republican candidate and only on election day? And yet for the nonpartisan races like District 43 in Allegheny County, we don't see change as turnout increases. It's election day too. Why are we not seeing these things? So our concern is this could be a sign of potential vote change, of manipulation of our tabulation machines. The statistical analysis is the concern. And so what is our actions, right? What's our call to action here? And so the Election Truth Alliance has founded a petition on change.org. You can go look it up, Hand Count of Pennsylvania, where we have, I think, over 10,000 signatures so far. And so we are reaching out to the state. We are publishing this data, and we would like to pursue an audit of any of these counties in Pennsylvania for election day to see if manipulation did occur. And if we look at those votes, do they match the reported totals?
That would be truly the only way to establish whether or not there was manipulation. You'd have to have the hand count, wouldn't you?
100%. There is no other, like we could have all of these statistical evidence in the world, but at the end of the day, you have to look at the paper votes.
This is terrific. I love what you're doing. Again, not saying that it was manipulated, but an audit is needed. And there you see electiontruthalliance.org. If it interests you, you want more. We just skimmed the surface. Nathan and his crew. Yeah.
The final question was, is it too late? Right. And why do we care? And as my final pitch, as we close up, it's never too late to do an audit. Whether the governor, the secretary of state, the attorney general, I think the secretary of state specifically has the legal authority to conduct an audit at any point. It's not a recount in the sense we're not going to decertify the election or change the results. We are going to investigate and audit and make sure that this didn't happen. Audits can be conducted by anyone at any time. In this case, if the state doesn't do it, then we are looking at pursuing a lawsuit to actually go to a county and sue to see the ballots and verify. So it's never too late. If this did happen, if our machines are manipulated, then every upcoming race, the midterms, future elections could be manipulated as well. So we need to make sure they weren't this time around. Wisconsin, right? Florida, these are upcoming races where it could happen there. If it happened here this time around and you had collected voters' information so that you could potentially vote for them, you could do it again. So unless we know and we make sure it didn't happen, we can't be sure.
Yeah, exactly right. I see what's happening for the Supreme Court election in Wisconsin and Musk's very aggressive moves there to do exactly the same thing, to essentially mine the electorate of their personal information. And what he can do with that personal information is scary. And it could play out just this way if this indeed is grounded in reality, which at least means the great thing about statistics is that they really typically are grounded in reality. So
the data doesn't lie.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Nathan,
good luck to you. I appreciate the succinct nature of this presentation. I know it can get a little overwhelming, but I think you took us through it in a really cool way, and I appreciate it. We'll visit again.
Thank you so much. We'll have more data in the future. We have North Carolina on our plate next, and then Iowa and Ohio.
Awesome. Look forward to that.
Thank you very much.
From the Election Truth Alliance, Nathan Taylor.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.